Welcome to Friday Friends, RI Elder Info's weekly look at the organizations and individuals providing resources for Rhode Island seniors, caregivers, and professionals.
I could listen to that intro music all day, every day. It's just so much fun to me. Happy Friday, everybody. As you know, I am Deb Burton, the host of our weekly streaming podcast show called Friday Friends. And this is where RI Elder Info brings guests every week to you that have information that you or someone you know needs to know about. So I strongly encourage you that you hit the like button, the share button, the bells, the whistles, all those social media cues that tell you, hey, this is really cool information. Check it out. So we are a nonprofit, and we could not do this without the support of our sponsors. So a huge thank you to Point 32 Health Foundation, to United Healthcare and Neighborhood Healthcare, Oak Street Health, 321 Media, England Studio. We are so grateful for their support that enables us to bring this show to you every week for going on almost 4 years. We got started during COVID to make sure that we could get as much information to people as possible, and we have kept going and kept growing. So thank you to all of our sponsors and all of our individual donors. I had an interesting experience this week where I had to be a really strong advocate for somebody. And coincidentally, I got an email from my guest, Kathleen Gerard. Come on up, Kathleen. And Kathleen gave some amazing tips on how to be an advocate for someone in long-term care that I have to say, I've been doing it a long time, and I really hadn't thought of it in this way. So, Kathleen, thank you so much for jumping on today. I know it was like a last-minute call, but your email to me was so pressing.
Thanks so much for having me, Deb. I'm so glad that it was helpful to you, and hope it'll be useful to many other people as well.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you were able to come on today. Can you share with everybody, what is your organization and what do you do?
So Advocates for Better Care in Rhode Island, or ABCRI, is a grassroots advocacy organization that was formed to advocate for the rights and interests of residents in long-term care.
Okay. And what is the do in that? What do you do for it? How do you advocate?
So there is direct advocacy, systemic advocacy, and legislative advocacy. And the bulk of our efforts are around legislative advocacy.
Okay.
We look at model legislation around the country that empowers residents in long-term care facilities and work to enact that legislation here in Rhode Island. Also look at places in the regulations where there is room for more empowerment for residents and for their representatives, and work to improve those regulations. Systemically, sorry, did you?
No. Go ahead, because the information that you're giving is absolutely amazing. So please keep going.
Systemically, we're very lucky to live in a state where government is very accessible. And there are a lot of opportunities for the public to take part in the policymaking and legislative process. So, for example, when a corporation wants to take over nursing homes in the state, they go through a fairly extensive application process, which goes through a group called the Health Services Council. And the Health Services Council does not tend to get a lot of input from the public or other bodies publicly. And there is a lot to consider when allowing a corporation to take over facilities that house and care for our most vulnerable. So,
Absolutely. So question, the Health Services Council, you said they don't get a lot of input. Is it considered a public meeting or is it a private meeting? Where is that under the umbrella of what entity?
so it's part of the Department of Health,
Okay.
and it is a public forum, public meeting. All of their documents, most of their documents are public online.
Mhm.
And the public is free to attend those meetings and to submit comment. So a big part of what ABCRI does is alert concerned individuals to when opportunities for comment arise and when opportunities to advocate for legislation or advocate against legislation in some cases, when those opportunities arise also. That community organizing.
Awesome. And so if people wanted to view that council or participate, can they find that information on the Secretary of State's website, or do they have to call Rhode Island Department of Health? How do people find out when it's taking place so they could participate and learn more?
That's a really good question. And I want to say it's the Department of Health website. To be honest, I don't remember the circuitous path that I took to get there, but the link to do so yourself, if it's not already available at abcri.org, it will be shortly.
Oh, that's great. And we can also drop that in the chat after the show too, to make sure that if people want to participate, that they can do that. And I can understand where some documents wouldn't necessarily be public, because if a corporation is in the process of buying a long-term care facility, there may be things that as a corporation are still, not public information. But the fact that they want to buy a nursing home or an assisted living facility would be public, right?
Right. And their application is also public. We are hoping that more about those corporations, both before they take effective control of our facility and after, we're hoping that more of that will become more transparent and accessible. And there will be legislation introduced this session to that end. And if you sign up at abc-ri.org to be on our mailing list, you'll be able to get action alerts when that legislation is introduced and when it comes up for hearing, so that you can voice your own thoughts on the matter.
And it was interesting. I just happened to, like, all things happen like all at once. Nothing ever happens like in a trickle. It's like drinking from the fire hose. I just participated earlier this week in a training on how to do effective advocacy at the State House. And I learned that if you're not able to participate when legislation is being heard, because it starts at the Rise at 5 o'clock at night, and it's in Providence, and sometimes parking is challenging, there's the opportunity to submit your testimony in writing. And you can also contact your legislators by phone, by email, so that if there's something that's important to you, there's several different mechanisms to be able to express your feelings, beliefs, data with the legislature for or against legislation. So Kathleen, you had mentioned that there are some goals with your program to reinforce that individuals in long-term care have rights. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I think sometimes people don't realize that just because their location of living has changed to a long-term care setting like an assisted living or nursing home, that they still have rights. Could you speak a bit on that?
Absolutely. So residents in nursing homes have rights that are protected by federal and state regulations going back to the Older Americans Act. And those have been updated and reinforced at various points. There are rights that are not as well enforced as others. And a lot of residents don't know about their rights. And there are rights that are not included that we are trying through legislation to have included. The other sort of tricky part is that assisted living facilities, which tend not to take Medicaid, but often provide care for a population that can overlap with that of nursing homes, are not regulated in the same way. And so the rights for those residents are not delineated in the same way or enforced in the same way. So we are also looking for opportunities to extend the same rights that residents of nursing homes have to residents of assisted living facilities.
Absolutely. And I think the way that we're all trying to age in place and remain in the community. We have efforts going towards a state homestead plan, which means having folks in the least restrictive environment, so that if you are an individual who needs the assisted living level of care, that you can receive that in an assisted living. But what has made this interesting is we have a lot of folks who do need more help than what they can effectively receive in the community and are appropriate for assisted living facilities and not really sick enough for nursing homes. So I see that there's a great opportunity for assisted living services to expand and to include greater coverage under Medicaid. Now, can you speak a little bit about the difference between your, say, traditional assisted living facility and a memory care assisted living facility? Because I think a lot of times people don't realize that. You think you're at home, you're at a nursing home, and like there's no continuum on that. So could you talk about the differences in the assisted living facilities too?
Sure. So we're going to see more memory care units within assisted living facilities. The profit margin for assisted living is significant right now. It is a growth area, as they say in the industry, and it's an audience that is not able to advocate for their own rights very effectively. There have been efforts to bring some of the rights of nursing home administrators over to assisted living facility administrators, and we advocate for bringing the responsibilities as well. So in an assisted living where you have a memory care unit that tends to be a locked unit and have a greater ratio of staff to residents for most of the day, most of the week. There are additional regulations for what the Department of Health calls a special care unit that you don't have in the rest of an assisted living facility. But it's still significantly less than what you would have in a nursing home. And a lot of the residents there, they don't need to be in a nursing home, but they do have needs that are greater than that of traditional assisted living. Ideally, I think we would have more specific gradations in that spectrum of need to address everyone's needs. So in the spirit of Olmsted, so everyone could have the least restrictive environment possible. We're seeing some places start with early memory care where it's not a locked unit, but there is still more supervision. But the state, the Department of Health, is going to need to address that as well with both the services that those facilities are allowed to provide and regulations for how they need to provide them safely.
Got it. It's one of those things I think sometimes that government entities create the regulations to oversee, but it being government, sometimes it's kind of behind what the market is doing. And it's almost a catch up. And I don't mean that in any disparaging way. I think it's just the way the system works. So if people have a loved one now who are living in either an assisted living facility or a nursing home, how could those family members or friends, how can they help their loved one advocate for themselves or improve their own ability to be an advocate for their loved one in the facility? What are some of those things that people can do?
That's a big question because you've got the residents themselves
Yep.
and their families, their legal representatives. If you are a healthcare agent or a power of attorney for someone who is a resident in a long-term care residence, you can do different things than, say, a family member who does not have those documents, does not have that legal status.
So knowing your legal status to be an advocate is part of it. And it sounds like that's probably a bigger part. And maybe we'll touch on just that piece in another episode. So if you're there and your loved one's not happy for, I don't know, whatever reason, something could be improved on, what can people do to be better advocates for this?
So if you are the primary advocate, the essential caregiver, care partner, you can and should take part in care plan meetings for your person, with your person and the staff and administration of the facility. And it's your responsibility really to help them know and understand the needs of your person, the preferences of your person, and how to meet those needs best. The staff and the administration has a wealth of experience, but no one knows your person like you do. And so you're part of that team. Being a care partner in a situation like that is being hired for a job that you never applied for and that you get no training for. And it's one of the hardest jobs that there is.
It is.
It's extraordinarily hard to be a care partner for a loved one outside of a facility. It's also hard when your loved one is being cared for in a long-term care facility, and it takes different skills, less of the direct caregiving and more negotiation, diplomacy, advocacy, oversight.
And so, I think a lot of times I think people have a negative view of long-term care settings. And there's definitely areas that could be improved. But for the most part, I think people who are in that career are there because they like to help people. The majority of the employees are there because they like to help people. But, I think there are things that we as individuals do on a daily basis that we may know are or are not important to our loved one. And when our loved one goes into that facility, if that's not communicated effectively to the staff, now your loved one could have a challenging experience. Does that sound about right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It is extraordinarily hard for the staff in these facilities. 47% of them rely on public assistance because their wages are so low. Many of them, I don't have the stats on this, have to work 2 jobs, sometimes at 2 different facilities, or they regularly work double shifts at the same facility. And they are usually, staffing is such that they are stretched extremely thin, and they are not able to provide the level of care that they want to provide for all of the residents for whom they're responsible.
And sometimes I think if we are able to give grace and share with them some of the things that make our loved one's life easier / better, I think it helps everybody all around. And one of the things, and I've shared this with my daughter, one of the last things I do before I go to bed is I brush my teeth. So if in the future I should develop dementia, and given the rates of increase in dementia, that could happen, I've told my daughter, make sure you tell the staff when it's time for me to go to bed, I have to brush my teeth. Otherwise, there's a really good likelihood that I'm going to be up walking the halls, because that's the last thing I do before I go to bed. So it's not necessarily that a staff member, is doing something wrong. They just don't know how you like to do it, right? So you do a lot of really cool things. You've got some legislation, I think, coming up. I know Medicaid, increasing Medicaid reimbursement so that some of these facilities can afford to pay their staff a reasonable wage so that they're not, at the federal poverty level. Improving the number of staff that are providing care in the building. Are there other legislative priorities that ABCRI has that you'd like to share?
Sure, thanks. Our top priority this year is a bill sponsored in the Senate by Senator Oyer and in the House by Representative Jason Knight that would give residents in long-term care facilities, both nursing homes and assisted living, the right to have a camera in their room if they choose. So this would be similar to the kinds of cameras that some people have in and around their homes. It would be controlled by the resident or their legal representative. If the resident has a roommate, the roommate would have to consent or there would be no camera. It's very well thought out legislation, and it allows both the resident and their representative to have peace of mind that they can directly oversee the care and condition that the resident is receiving. And it can benefit staff as well in exonerating them when they are falsely accused, which is not that unusual. It's not uncommon for there to be resident to resident interactions that can result in insult and injury. And if that happens in a resident's room and they are permitted to have a camera, it's evident how that is happening, whereas it wouldn't be otherwise, and staff could be blamed.
That sounds really cool, because if you think about as much as we have, I mean, that's not supporting one product over another here, but like a Ring doorbell. I know with my Ring doorbell, I have the ability to do two-way communication. So I feel like that might be something that if you are a long distance caregiver and your loved one is in agreement, because this bill is only for residents who say, yes, I'm fine with having a camera in my room. I want a camera in my room. It seems like that might even provide some comfort to some long distance caregivers, where they may be able to, just check in, every morning. Hey, good morning, Mom. Good morning, Dad. How are you doing today? Awesome. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Absolutely.
With an added benefit of, I know Mom gets mixed up sometimes with her dementia, and she thinks that, there's people having parties in her closet, and I can see that there's no parties in her closet. things like that, yeah, it seems like this would be legislation that would be beneficial to many. Um,
And there's technology now with that two-way communication where it's like making a FaceTime or Skype or Zoom call, but the resident doesn't have to answer it. They don't
yep.
have to swipe or tap or do anything. It just, you appear on their screen. And that was invaluable for me when my husband was in a dementia care facility and no longer understood how to operate an iPad. But during the time when we were in lockdown and I wasn't allowed to visit in person, I could just appear. And that provided a moment that was unsettling for him at the beginning, because all of a sudden there's my wife, but then comfort for both of us.
Yeah,
And with
absolutely.
long distance, yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all want to live our best lives to the very, very end. And staying connected with our loved ones in whatever means necessary, I think is really key to that, to be able to connect, stay connected, ensure that your loved one is getting the care that they need and that they want. It's an opportunity that if your loved one is maybe having a rough day, that family member who's on the West Coast can zoom in and say, hey, the aide is really trying to be helpful. Maybe you don't need to be so gruff with them. Maybe you're just having a grumpy kind of day today, and provide that soothing reassurance that everything's okay. So I see that there's definitely some benefits. Now, you mentioned earlier that you are a volunteer with the Long-Term Care Ombudsman's Office. And if I recall seeing the social media right, because they've got a lot of social media on this, that there is now a Zoom support group. Do you participate in that at all, as in your role as a volunteer?
I do, yeah. And I should state that I do not speak for the state long-term care ombudsman program, but I am very honored to be a volunteer in that program and to take part in these monthly Zoom family support meetings. And I'm so glad that we have started doing these. It has been really, I think, useful and supportive to the care partners who have joined us so far. We only started this program in October, but giving people who are walking that same care partner path the opportunity to connect with each other and the guidance and encouragement that we can give them, I think is really helpful to them. And it's been wonderful to see what strong advocates some of these people are and how they're able to help each other.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that there is great value in being able to connect with other individuals who may be going through some of the similar things with having a loved one in long-term care. So this Zoom group, if I recall reading the social media correctly, from the state long-term care ombudsman's office, it really is there for creating a safe, supportive group among other family members and friends of residents in long-term care. And then if somebody identifies an issue that they would like to have checked out, then they could have that conversation with the state long-term care ombudsman program, which is totally separate from ABCRI. It's just something that, as a volunteer, you're continuing your work to help people become knowledgeable and connected and feel cared for and supported, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a number of volunteers with the state long-term care ombudsman program are also members of ABCRI separately.
Yeah.
But that program allows us to do the direct advocacy and to directly support residents and their representatives, helping to empower them and to advocate for themselves more effectively.
That is awesome. So it just sounds like you as an individual have a big heart for advocacy and making sure that people have the justice that they seek, the care and support that they seek. And you sent yesterday an email out that had some really great tips for care partners in how to communicate, how to document. So I think that information is on your website. And so I encourage people to go there to the abc-ri.org so that they can get, really good tips, things that I hadn't thought of. And boy, let me tell you, I wish I had thought of it before yesterday morning when I had to get all advocate-y with somebody. But I think what you're doing is really amazing because you're hitting it on multiple levels. So you mentioned that you're a grassroots organization. Are you a nonprofit? Are you a group of individuals? If people want to support what you're doing, how can they do that? Is it a donations mechanism? Is it just a volunteer, spread the word kind of thing? Contact your legislator? How can people help you?
So we're not a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit. We don't do anything.
No money.
No money. The best way to work with us and support our work is to sign up for our email list. And you will not get very many emails from us, I assure you. But when you do, they will be action alerts to let you know about opportunities to submit testimony, written or in person, or to submit public comment. Most of it is for state legislation, but there are sometimes opportunities for federal legislation as well, or for other Rhode Island issues where we can have a voice.
That is so important. Kathleen, I'm so glad that everything that you have going on, that you were able to come on today. I know it was last minute. When I got your information yesterday, I'm like, no, I gotta talk to Kathleen right away. So I appreciate you like kind of clearing your calendar for me. I told you it'd be like 15 minutes. I have doubled your time.
I could keep going for 2 hours.
Thank you so much for coming on today. And
so
tell everybody
much,
again, what's your website and how can they reach you?
It's abc-ri.org. And you can email me directly at kathleen@abc-ri.org. And we'd love to have you work with us.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too, Deb.
We can all be advocates for ourselves as well as advocates for others. And part of being a good advocate is knowing how to advocate and how to navigate the systems and understand the impacts of the legislation. And that is what Kathleen's program is all about. So I encourage you to reach out, check out her website, sign up for her newsletter, and be informed about what's coming down the pike as far as legislation is happening, what is happening in our long-term care systems, and ways that we can all work together to make the experience of aging independently a reality and as good as we can. So I am glad that you were all able to join me this week. I look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to start mixing it up a little bit. Our first Fridays of Friday Friends, the first Fridays of the month, are going to be Financial Fitness Fridays. And we're going to be talking every first Friday of the month, different financial considerations that you or someone you know needs to know about as we financially prepare to age independently. So I look forward to seeing you all again next week. In the meantime, be well and be kind.
If you liked this video, Please follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube. For more information, visit rielderinfo.com or call 401-585-0509. If you have any questions, email deb@rielderinfo.com.